Anwar was 24 years old and could, without exaggeration, disassemble and reassemble almost any engine in the country in a single working day. He had learned the trade from his father, who had run a small car repair workshop on a lane at the edge of the mid-sized city where Anwar had grown up. And Anwar had, at 19, taken over from his father when his father's back had finally given out. He was, by any honest measure, a gifted mechanic. His hands understood cars in a way that his own head had never quite understood most other things. His problem was that he could not speak English. He had, of course, studied it. In school, for 12 years, from a series of tired teachers who had drilled him on grammar tables, he could still, if pushed, recite in his sleep. He could read the small English service manuals that came with the newer cars. He understood, roughly, what a British YouTube video was saying about a specific gearbox. But he had never, in his 24 years of life, held a full spoken English conversation with another human being. He had never needed to. His father had handled all the customers. Then he had handled them himself in Urdu. Then, on the first Monday of April, a British company had bought his small workshop. The new manager was a warm, thin man named Mr. Grant, who had worked in car repair his whole life, and who spoke Urdu at the level of a polite 8-year-old. He arrived on the first Monday, sat down with all 4 of the mechanics on his new team, and told them gently but clearly that the company was moving into the luxury and expat market, and that within 3 months, all mechanics would need to be able to explain to customers in basic English what was wrong with their cars, what would need to be done to fix them, and how long it would take. He was not asking, he said, for university English. He was asking for the ability to speak with a customer for 5 minutes about their engine. He would provide small English classes twice a week, but it would be, he said, mostly up to them. Anwar sat in his small office chair and looked at his oil-black hands. He was, that afternoon, the best mechanic on the team. He knew that. Everyone knew that. And he was also, that afternoon, the man most likely to be quietly demoted in 3 months to a floor position where he never touched a customer, because none of his colleagues had any less English than he did. He went home that evening and did what he had always done when faced with a problem. He tried to solve it by studying. He bought a small English phrase book for automotive vocabulary. He sat at his kitchen table until midnight for 2 weeks, copying sentences into a notebook. The problem is your air filter. The problem is your fuel injection. The problem is your alternator. The problem is your radiator hose. He memorized 20 such sentences. He rehearsed them silently in his head. He felt briefly ready. He was not ready. His first customer interaction came in the 3rd week. A tall Englishwoman drove a small silver car into the workshop and told him, warmly in English, that something was making a strange noise near the front left wheel. Anwar heard perhaps 60% of what she said. He knew what she meant. He asked her in slow, careful English to please wait 10 minutes. He lifted the car. He identified the problem in under 3 minutes, a loose brake caliper bolt, which he could easily fix in half an hour. He walked back to her. He opened his mouth, and he could not, for the life of him, find the English word for caliper. It was not in his memorized list. His list contained air filter and fuel injection and alternator. It did not contain the small metal thing that squeezed the wheel disc when you stepped on the brake. He stood in front of her, an oil rag in his hand, and said, "Slowly, madam, there is a small problem." He did not continue. She waited. He looked at his rag. She smiled kindly. Mr. Grant, who had been watching from a distance, walked over gently and translated the situation. The Englishwoman thanked Anwar. She left her car. Anwar fixed the car in 20 minutes. But he sat for the rest of that afternoon, staring at his hands and understanding that his careful lists were not going to save him. That evening, on his phone in bed, he found a small, quiet video made by a woman with a soft voice who said something that Anwar had never heard anyone say quite that way before. She said that many learners spent years memorizing perfect sentences and then froze in real conversations, because real conversations did not follow the sentences a person had memorized. She said that the real skill of speaking was not memorizing sentences, but being able to describe things when you did not know the exact word. She said that if a person forgot the word for umbrella, they could say the thing you use when it rains, and the conversation would keep going. She said that if a person forgot the word for refrigerator, they could say the big cold box in the kitchen, and the conversation would keep going. She said that describing what you did not know was not a failure of English. It was English. Anwar watched the video twice. He wrote down on a small piece of oily paper 5 short pieces of advice. Speak every day, even if it is slow. Use the words you have, not the ones you wish you had. Describe when you forget. Ask a question when you get stuck. Do not be afraid of mistakes, because mistakes are how mechanics learn engines and how mouths learn languages. He began the next morning. He stood in the small yard behind the workshop before the other mechanics arrived with a spanner in his hand. He said aloud in slow English, "This is a spanner. This is a wrench. This is an oil filter." He walked around the yard. He named things. When he did not know a word, he described it in English instead of switching to Urdu. This is the small round thing that turns when the engine starts. This is the black rubber tube that carries the water from the front to the back. This is the metal box under the car where the oil sits. His descriptions were slow and ugly, but they were English, and every day for a few weeks he did more of them. He asked one of the younger apprentices, a boy of 17 named Faisal who had done rather well at English in school, to spend 10 minutes a day speaking only English with him during the lunch break. Faisal agreed warmly because he was fond of Anwar. They ate their rice at a small metal table in the yard. Anwar asked Faisal in slow English questions about his day. What did you eat this morning? What did you do yesterday evening? Do you like your cousin's new phone? Faisal answered slowly, and in return asked Anwar the same kinds of questions, and Anwar, over 3 weeks, learned that a conversation could be built almost entirely from questions and short, honest answers, and that it did not have to be beautiful in order to be real. His second customer interaction, a month after the first, went differently. An older American gentleman brought in a small red car with a rattling exhaust. Anwar greeted him. He listened carefully. He asked in careful English, "Sir, please can you show me where you hear the sound?" The man showed him. Anwar lifted the car, identified the problem, and walked back. He said, "Sir, there is a small problem with the pipe under the car. It is loose. I can fix it in 1 hour. The price will be small." He forgot the English word for exhaust. He described it instead. The man smiled and said, "Ah yes, the exhaust," and Anwar repeated the word aloud 3 times so he would never forget it again. The man waited. Anwar fixed the car. When the man paid, he said to Anwar kindly, "Your English is better than you think." Anwar walked back to his corner of the workshop and sat down for a moment with his hands trembling slightly. It was the first time in his life that anyone had praised his English. He understood, 24 years old, and he was, at last, beginning to become the man who could keep his job. Over the next 2 months, he built a small, quiet practice. He recorded himself once a week on his phone, describing a car problem in English for 2 minutes. He listened back to the recordings on Sundays. He tried, during service, to speak at least 3 full English sentences to every customer, however wrong they sounded. He mimicked Mr. Grant's warm British sentences under his breath while working. He asked Faisal at lunch 1 new question every week. He kept a small, oily notebook in his tool drawer where he wrote down every new English word he learned from customers: caliper, timing belt, coolant, ignition, suspension. At the end of the 3 months, Mr. Grant sat down with each mechanic for a small assessment. When Anwar's turn came, Mr. Grant asked him to explain, in English, what would be involved in replacing a car's brake pads. Anwar spoke in careful, slow, imperfect English for 4 full minutes. He forgot 2 words. He described them warmly instead. Mr. Grant nodded through the whole explanation. At the end, he smiled and said, "Well done, Anwar. Your English is not perfect, but you are the only mechanic on this team I would trust to explain a problem to a difficult customer. That matters more." A year later, when a new young mechanic joined the workshop, a boy of 19 named Kashif who was excellent with engines but froze the moment a customer opened their mouth. Anwar took him aside in the yard one evening and said only a few things, slowly, one at a time. "Speak every day," he said, "even to yourself, even if it is slow. Use the words you have, not the ones you wish you had. When you forget a word, describe it. Do not stop. Ask a small question when you get stuck. It gives you time and it keeps the customer talking. Do not fear your mistakes. They are how your mouth learns, exactly the way your hands learn engines." The boy frowned. "That is all," he said. Anwar smiled the small smile of a man who had learned